welcome to the Rural Economic Development Summit on broadband infrastructure and workforce opportunities. We are ecstatic to have everyone here in this room and those joining us virtually. My name is Philip Jones, and I am the Community Engagement Associate here at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. Today's convening is an extension of our Rural Community Action Assemblies, which began a series that began in 2020. Focusing on actual research and programmatic models to promote strong and equitable workforce and community economic development in rural Pennsylvania. So first, I'd like to take a moment very quickly to thank Dr. Kyle and his team at the Center of Rural PA. They have been amazing partners in the planning and convening of our speakers, and we are truly appreciative of their continued support in helping making events like this such a reality. I'd also like to thank our esteemed speakers today that hail from throughout the country. We are excited to learn from our leading experts on research, initiatives, programming to better understand how communities can equip themselves with the knowledge and resources to support an inclusive approach to broadband development and labor force participation. And lastly, I'd also like to thank all of you guys participating here today, in person and virtually. We know how valuable your guys' time is, and we are grateful that you are all choosing to spend your day here with us. We've heard from many stakeholders in the rural communities that the forthcoming Broadband Equity Act and Development deployment, more affectionately known as BEAD, and the Digital Equity Act funding provide an unprecedented opportunity to make informed investments into the development of broadband infrastructure. And as we are informed of those investments, that the significant influx of funding will stimulate the economy of the rural economy. I'm sorry, going a little bit too fast today. I'm gonna slow down. We're also cognizant of the skilled workforce that will be needed here to build such infrastructure. Strategically addressing the need for a broadband workforce is essential for bridging that gap and ensuring equitable access to digital resources, empowering rural communities to compete in a global market. And I think we're all here today just to kind of understand a little bit more about that as well. Our community and regional outreach team in Philadelphia Fed is committed to advancing this key dialogue on inclusive growth and promoting strategies to ensure all residents have access to broadband and all workers can fully participate in the economy. So on the next slide, I'm going to move on here. I'm going to give our standard disclaimer. Some of you guys probably have already heard it. But it needs to be said. So this also applies to all the speakers today. The information, analysis, and conclusions set forth are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. Okay, that's out of the way. On to our two next slides. You'll see you're in for a great series of discussions today. I'll be inviting different panels to share their expertise. Later this afternoon, we'll divvy up into smaller groups to really dive deeper into key areas as noted on the agenda. We have a great group of in-person today. We also have many virtual participants, and we want for everyone to have an engaging experience. So I encourage those that are here in person to ask as many questions to our experts as possible. For those that are remote, please place your questions in the chat, and we will be sure that our speakers address those as well. Okay. Next slide. Ready. We're also, I'm going to go back to perfect. We're also recording today's session, and we will post the content of our website following the event. Your feedback matters. So immediately following the event, we will forward you all that are participating virtually an online survey. I implore all of you guys to please complete that survey, as it really means a lot, and also it helps inform our future programming. For those of you that are in person, there's also a paper copy in everyone's folder that you guys can also fill out before you leave. You are not allowed to leave. I need that bait. Next, I'd like to invite Ashley Putnam. She's our director of the Philadelphia Fed's Economic Growth Mobility Project. And the first panel to the front. For those of you participating virtually, we are now going to turn off the presentation, have the camera panel kind of shift in, and we'll be off and rock and roll. So thank you guys again for all attending, not only virtually but in person. Super excited for today. If you guys have any questions, technical questions, I will be in the corner here, and you guys can access today. So thank you.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? We're doing great. Thank you, Philip, for kicking this off. And I just want to reiterate the thanks for being here. I know there are folks attending virtually and folks attending in person. And this is a conversation we have been getting into more and more at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia and across the Federal Reserve System. And I will say one of the questions I often get is, why is this something that the Fed is interested in? So I lead the Federal Reserve Strategic Initiative, as Philip mentioned, on economic mobility. And I come into the digital equity space a lot from the perspective of thinking about work. So thinking about how do people connect to opportunity? How do we think about the future of work and what the future looks like? How do we think about what people's jobs are going to look like down the line? And as we start to think about that, we realize that jobs are becoming increasingly more digital. But digital equity is necessary in all aspects of our lives. It's just not just important for work, it's important for getting access to healthcare, getting access to basic needs and services, being able to just live a good quality life. So we are here today, and this first panel is about economic imperative for participating in a digital economy. And I could not agree more with the word imperative as we're standing here, because we are at the precipice of a fairly big moment. We are looking at a record amount of spending in terms of digital equity and broadband that we have ever seen. I believe the number for BEAD is 42.5 billion. So just to sit with that number as we walk into this day. And one of the questions we are really thinking about is, how do we make sure that that funding is allocated in a way that it supports the people who really need it the most, and that we are solving for some of the problems that have brought us here today. We know that the broadband internet is the highway of today's access to jobs. We need digital equity in terms of access to internet. We need digital equity in terms of access to devices. We need digital skills, and we need trained workers to be able to. So that is what brings us here today to this conversation. I am excited about this moment at this time. I will say we've been doing this work at the Fed for just a little bit, and so I just want to acknowledge some of the things that the Federal Reserve System has been doing. My colleague Jeremy from the Kansas City Fed has published quite a bit around digital equity. We got to meet with state leaders in 2022. It was the very first time I met Brandon when he was first getting started. We all came together to ask the question about what can we do to help states build capacity around this digital equity planning. We hosted a digital equity research conference in Dallas. Teresa helped put that together. And we've been doing just a great amount of research on this topic. And I hope that at least at minimum emphasizes to you that we don't think about this at the Fed as an interesting thing that is happening, but as economically essential, both for the future of work, the future of economic mobility, and the future of our regions. And so that is why we're here today, because this is an important economic moment for us to talk about digital equity, broadband access, and digital infrastructure. So I am very excited today to be joined by a pretty incredible panel to kick off the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you guys as we go down, because I've got some questions and I know we want to jump into some things. So to my left is Brandon Peters, who is the Deputy Director for the Broadband Development, the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority. We've had a pleasure of working with their team over the past few years. We are also joined by Debbie Kish, who is the Vice President of Research and Workforce Development at the Fiber Broadband Association, and has just an incredible amount of work and knowledge about what's happening in the broadband-related space and workforce space. Rob Fry is joining us, who is the General Field Representative from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we are also joined digitally today. So we're doing this hybrid. We're leaning into this digital equity. A virtual panelist, so everyone say hello to Karen Lightman, who's joining us. She's the Executive Director of Metro 21, the Smart Cities Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. Thank you so much for being here, Karen. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brandon to kick us off. Our conversation today is really, we're thinking about how broadband impacts local economies, and really curious as you think about this from your perspective at the Broadband Ready program and the work that you're doing at the Commonwealth. How are you thinking about broadband? I believe you're going to share some slides here.
Yeah, absolutely. Should I grab the clicker up there?
Yeah. Hold on a second. You stay.
Okay.
All right. Amazing. Here's Brandon.
That works.
Yeah. Amazing.
Amazing how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the work we're doing at the PBA and how it affects rural economies. Firstly, I think that when we were formed, PBA was placed in the Department of Community and Economic Development for a reason, right? Because the Commonwealth recognizes it as a truly an economic development component, and so that was a no-brainer for why it was housed there. The other piece that when considering this panel and starting to think about how to talk about it, like some of the resources that we have and some of the resources that we've been developing over the past multiple years, a year and a half, 2 years, the Digital Equity Plan came to mind because it specifically talks about how broadband affects economies and specifically about how it affects rural economies. And so I have a few pieces that I wanted to pull from there to talk about. Firstly, throughout our community conversations that we held with individuals from across the state, we held an initial round of about 26 of those of various forms. And then we were able to, we've been constantly out talking with people before and after those community conversations. But a few of the things that we heard were there are challenges that are directly related to affordability, something that we're actively looking at addressing, or the economic challenges of rural communities with shrinking populations. How does that matter from an ROI perspective, from a development perspective? And then the lack of broadband limits in educational and economic opportunities that extend not only in the generation that exists, but the next generation. Those are things we're seeking to address as well. There are 5 ways that the Digital Equity Plan talks about addressing, talks about how rural economies are impacted by the lack of broadband service. Those are no lack of service or lack of infrastructure, obviously, expensive service, fewer providers, unreliable service, and then inherently what comes along with those is low consumer confidence. It's just the natural progression of things. And so those are things we're looking to address. And I want to read one quote from our Digital Equity Plan. The impact on individual success, upward mobility, future opportunities for the next generation, and community economic prosperity is clear for Pennsylvanians. Equitable access to broadband service, internet-enabled devices, digital skills helps Pennsylvanians pursue continued education, advance their career opportunities, increase their pay, and save and invest in stability for themselves and their families. That speaks a lot about how broadband specifically can improve the lives in rural Pennsylvania, the rural economies at large as well from a macro perspective. And so that's why these investments exist, and that's why we're doing this. The next slide, and this one's always kind of shocking whenever we throw this slide around, because it truly highlights the disparity and the problem that exists. So on the left-hand side, you see unserved locations to the tune of about 234,000. And unserved definition is that it's less than 25 megabits per second download speed and 3 megabits per second upload. And on the right side of the screen, you see underserved locations at about 52,000. Those numbers obviously fluctuate as places get built out and we learn more about the DSLs that exist out there. But essentially, and I like to maybe this. I think this is the right term. This is our checkerboard. We are looking at taking these locations off the map. This is how we're approaching it. We want to have a clean map here, and so that's what Internet for All means: is to do everything in our power to remove these locations so that they can be competitive from a digital dignity perspective, from an equity perspective, sure, and just from an economic competitiveness perspective. So that's the work we're doing. An important point on this map is 95% of those locations that you see do not fall in an urbanized area. So we're talking about rural economies and how it's impacted. 95% of those locations fall in rural areas. And so that's a striking fact that we're looking to address. To also put in perspective, we're talking about 780,000 locations here. Overall, the state has 4.8 million BSL. So the overwhelming majority of those are served. So there's a disparity there, and we're looking to close that disparity. And our first attempt at that, our first piece of that puzzle is the Broadband Infrastructure Program, or BIP, as we call it, where we awarded $204 million in grant awards to essentially 50. Well, just to preface this, this was a highly competitive program. We received 231 applications, so obviously a very competitive program. First, nearly $1 billion. We had $200 million more than $200 million to award, and we received $1 billion of request, which says some things. It says, obviously, that there is a disparity and a need that needs addressed, and then it also says that we have willing partners out there that are going to work on this, going to help us work on this to achieve what we need to achieve, and removing those locations from the checkerboard I mentioned. So it's worth noting here that there were diverse technologies that were awarded: fiber to the home, hybrid fiber cable, also in a few limited instances, some licensed fixed wireless. And you see the 42 counties obviously addressed, and more than 40,000 unserved and underserved locations we're going to take off the board with the BIP program, which is a huge driving factor, being able to take as many of those off the board as possible. And significant investment along with significant partner match. It says a lot about the ISPs that they're willing to bring significant match to the table to help us accomplish our goal here. And obviously the awardees are on the way there. So there's 12 unique awardees across 53 projects. And so the geographic distribution, the geographic distribution of those projects are what you see here on the map. It's important to note that so we have $204 million. That's a lot of money. That is the first 15% of the dollars that we have available. You had mentioned $42 billion. Pennsylvania's share of that allocation is $1.16 billion. And so while that's a lot of money, we have a mountain of a task here that we're working to achieve. And that $204 million taking those locations, those at least 40,000 locations out there, represents the first 15% of that effort. A few things that we learned and we're actively working on is, obviously when you look at the map, there's a few areas that didn't receive funding. And it's not to say, if you go back to the map, there are locations in those areas. So we need to improve applications in some of these areas. And in many cases, in the blank spots on the map, there weren't applications. And so, not only that, we need to encourage coordination between small and medium-sized ISPs, encourage coordination with counties and municipalities and other folks to be able to accomplish this. So the other thing, with BIP, there weren't defined project areas because we wanted to allow providers to help build off the networks that they have. With BEAD, one of the things that you'll see that's a key difference is we will have defined project areas to be able to achieve internet for all. And our goal is really to promote and encourage willing partners to help us achieve that. And so on to BEAD. That's our largest pot of funds, which is the $1.16 billion. And so while we had 12 partners, 12 awardees in the last in BIP, we want to encourage as many partners to participate in BEAD, because we really do need you to be able to build this out. A few of the important components. I mean, there were many components in our volume 2, which was just approved actually the week prior and announced last week. And we will have a final document. We get a lot of questions about that. We'll have a final document ready here in the next few days, and we'll be pushing that through our distribution list and placing on our website. But our volume 2 called out a couple of things. Two that I really want to highlight, many things, but two that I really want to highlight is affordability. So middle class affordability. Do you have internet for all if the internet's not affordable? That's something that we're really striving towards. We think we've struck a good balance with our middle class affordability. And also, the low cost service option, something that's tied directly was tied to ACP, but as ACP is phased out, we saw that coming, and we tied it to the federal poverty guidelines. And so as the federal poverty guidelines change, the low cost service option may change as well. The other components that I know we're going to talk a lot about today is the workforce readiness components. One of the things that's required through our volume 2 is a comprehensive workforce development plan. So we hope to see a lot of good quality applications, and one of the pieces that will lead a good quality application is that. But then also we can't negate the fact that the Commonwealth Workforce Transformation Program exists. It's something that we are through here in the state of Pennsylvania, an executive order that dedicates 3% of all IIJA dollars to a workforce program that comes through the projects themselves. And so for $1.16 billion, it's over $30 million, closer to $35 million. And so those are funds that we'll be dedicating to workforce activities through the CWTP program. So as a project comes into us, they will be able to tell us about how they intend to employ the workforce the CWTP, and that's how we'll one of the evaluation criteria. A few notes on the BEAT timeline, real quick. And we're in the middle of the challenge process now, and that's open until May 23rd, the end of this week. We'll be doing the rebuttal of challenges through June 22nd, and ultimately final determinations in mid-July on July 22nd. So that's kind of where we are on the timeline. A few of the next steps. So on to another thing that was asked for us to cover is the broadband ready communities. And I understand why, because we talk about rural communities and how they're impacted by economic development, and how 95% of those locations that we have are in those rural communities. In many cases, there are some capacity difficulties in some of those communities. And so our intent is to work through our Broadband Ready Communities program as a public-private partnership to help and encourage collaboration early and often throughout the process. This one actually garnered a lot of attention early on. A lot of folks were very interested, municipalities and the counties who want their municipalities to go through a Broadband Ready Communities program. And essentially, what it does is it exists to cut down barriers, to streamline permitting processes, to help municipalities and counties figure out ways that they can better partner with providers, or their county or others that want to help them deploy broadband. And essentially, get out of the way of the deployment. And they want to, they just need to understand it. I think the Broadband Ready Communities program leads to that. And so you see here the various worksheet components that we will require through the Broadband Ready Community BBRC program. Just general things like documentation of community supports show that you've had those conversations. Identification and understanding of the applicable funding. And some of these are optional, but indication of match, creation of an asset inventory, and reduction of barriers. And kind of where we are at this component, we've already gone through pre-registration. We had hundreds of municipalities and counties reach out to us to pre-register for this program. We're in the middle now of working through applications, done an educational webinar. One of the things that we're encouraging is, obviously they need to pass a resolution that they are going to support. They're going to be ready for this work. And so that's one of the things we're encouraging early is to go through, get that resolution adopted, because it's something that will take a little bit of time to run through their municipal government to do so. So that's one of the things we're encouraging. The most important part of this is, I think it becomes, ultimately, we will designate these folks, these municipalities after December 31st, we'll designate them broadband ready, and then they can use that to tout their broadband readiness to other, to various potential ISP partners, other municipalities. So that's the value of it. Say, hey, we're open for business. Let's talk. And I believe that's it.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, so my summary from that is you're doing a lot. Just a little bit. And I'm really struck by that map because I think about that not just in terms of the depth and the breadth of the problem, but also just the human side of what we're seeing in those counties, that those are people who are living in those places, who are experiencing low connectivity, lack of affordable connectivity, not being able to connect to digital infrastructure. So I think as we think about today, I hope we will all sit with that map and that picture in our heads as we talk about what it means for rural communities to really be disconnected. I'm excited actually to turn it over to Debbie to talk a little bit about the Fiber Broadband Association, what you do there. And we're thinking about those folks in that community. There's a conversation here about like what's the economic value of good internet? Why is that an important thing? What brings us here today?
And I had these slides too, how do I go back to?
Yes.
Wait.
But we have slides for her. Do you want to jump in and I'll?
Yeah. So, and you'll see on the first slide. So my name is Debbie Kish and I'm the Vice President of Research and Workforce Development. So I wear two hats at FBA. I cover and manage our research program, and I also am managing our fiber optic tech program, and I work with the states and different companies around workforce development. So to tell you a little bit about Fiber Broadband Association, we are a member. We were established in 2001, and we advocate for all fiber broadband networks. Fiber to the home, fiber to the farm, fiber to anywhere. Our mantra is that if you can get electricity, you can get fiber. So we're part of a larger organization, which is the Fiber to the Home Global Alliance, and we're just rebranded ourselves to Fiber Broadband Association some years ago. We're member-based and member-led, and I use the term member-led intentionally. There are 16 or so committees and working groups, anything from technology committee to deployment specialists and sustainability and all things to do with how to deploy fiber broadband. And I think my slides are up. There we go. There you go. So we are I think we're around 535 to 550 members right now. And they range anywhere from telecommunication service providers, so that includes rural co-ops, electric co-ops, municipalities, anyone who's deploying and offering internet service. The other part of our members, the other 45 to 50% are vendors of the telecommunications equipment and tools and installation contractors. And we also have a group of consultants that also work with us. About FBA. So I mentioned that, I'm also managing the research program, and that means that, we've been conducting some studies. So I also pulled from some studies that have been conducted in the past, and they're all around the impact of fiber broadband to a community. And this is really important. So I think I'm going to start with the one in the middle, the Tennessee example. So EPB, the provider out there, had deployed a fiber network with the intention of it being around a smart grid. And Professor Bento Lobo had, over time, had done some economic studies on, what the impact was to the community. And this was in Hamilton County, Tennessee, I believe. So he did an extensive report that was largely an economic study, but there were some nuggets of information that I thought was kind of interesting to pull out and show, what the impact was in terms of, to the community and in terms of jobs. So it was between 2011 and 2020, and it was the project was started by a $117 million federal grant. And that was what they were going to use for the smart grid. Some things that I found important to highlight are the creation of over 9,500 jobs as a result of that, which is, incredible. It's in a time where we're looking at, the the job market in general. Bringing fiber broadband created over 95,000 jobs. It also brought an extra $244 million in business adventures and attracted $110 million in research projects. It saved businesses $260 million in improved power reliability from 2010 through 2020. And I think those are pretty exciting stats. And like I said, the reason they built it was to create a smart grid and improve the electrical service over those past 10 years. And it reduced power outages from 40 to 55%. A quote from the report itself is, "The value exceeds the cost of the project by over $2.2 billion, or a factor of 4.42. Roughly 40% of all jobs created in Hamilton County in the study period can be attributed to fiber infrastructure." So now I'm going to move on to Virginia. And this was a study that the Fiber Broadband Association did as well. Our criteria was that we valued the need to look at fiber. The impact would probably take effect 5 years. I mean, Professor Lobo did the study over 10 years, but we figured about 5 years was the good, where we would probably start seeing some benefits. As you know, things take time, but some initial findings in this community, the report hasn't been published yet, but the community is Charlottesville, and the provider there was Ting. And the economist is Dr. Brian Whitaker. So some initial findings here is the city of Charlottesville recognized approximately $4 million per year increase in housing value. And, I mean, that's always been something that I've been on the fence about, how much, and as much as it sounds like I'm talking against fiber, but I'm not. But the housing market, is always kind of wishy-washy. It's all based on economy, it's all based on demand, and there's a bunch of other factors that go into it. But this has been, in the time frame that Ting has deployed their network in Charlottesville. So $4 million increase in home values. Also, an increase in digital microbusinesses. Lots of people were able to be the entrepreneur that they always wanted to be. That's the value of being able to work from home. And, a stat that I always like to see is a 35% job growth in the private sector. So other impacts from other reports and interviews that we conducted with communities, one of Oregon, Massachusetts, and Washington State. They include things that we already know about. The community effects is access to healthcare. That's always important. And education and telecommuting. And telecommuting, the benefits extend beyond just being able to work from home. There's sustainability benefits to telecommuting. But keeping the community connected in a natural disaster. The case in the wildfires in Oregon, Douglas Fastnet was able to keep the internet working during these wildfires, and the community was able to keep up with everything that was happening and what they needed to do or what they didn't need to do. I think that's really important to stay connected during the whole time. I also heard something recently. I was in Mississippi last week, and I heard it similar. There was a lot of straight line winds coming through the area, and the internet was able to stay on because it's a fiber network, and they were able to keep the electricity through generators and things like that. So as much as the same we saw in Tennessee and Westfield Gas and Electric in Massachusetts, Westfield, Massachusetts, they recognized over $88 million annually in revenue. So the bottom line is that when fiber networks are built, the dollars it takes to build the network, the money gets recirculated back into the community, and it builds the economy ultimately. So this is just another example. We put together an infographic of some of the examples of some of the findings over the years on it's available on our website, and the colored squares and the quadrants. But I thought it was worthwhile highlighting here. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, federal investment should have long-term benefits to the public and the economy. The project's cost over the entire lifespan needs to be considered, and projects should be built sustainably and resiliently. And the examples that I showed in the previous slide, where we saw the financial benefits to the community and just the overall, I mean, one of my favorite quotes was the in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where the cost of the network, the benefits far outweigh the cost. I mean, it may have taken, 6 to 10 years to get there, but the bottom line is that it's there. And, when you're looking at building economies, it's critical in this day and time. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about workforce, which is something that I am extremely passionate about. If any of you have ever been on the phone with me, you'll see how excited I get. So fiber is a little bit over 40 years old, and right now we're in what I consider dire straits. And this is a little shameless PSA, but coming to the 1 o'clock session with Amelia and a couple of others to talk about workforce. So we're a pretty young industry, and our workforce is old, self-included. I've been in the industry for 25, 26 years. But what that means is if you look at the graphics on this chart, the two smaller green bars, actually I'm going to focus on the big long green bars in each of them. These are 3 different occupations. I can't read it from here and I don't have it memorized, but there's fiber optic technician, broadband technician, and splicers, I think is up. But the important thing to look at is the long green line at the bottom. That represents the 40-year-old plus age group. So they make up 60 to 70% of our current workforce today. This chart is probably, 2 years old, but nothing's changed. So, and that's really kind of sad, if you ask me. But so the two shorter green bars above them are the 20 to 30-year-old category, which is at the top, and then the middle one is 30 to 40 years old. We have not done a good job, and I might repeat myself a little bit, so forgive me, but the industry has not done a good job at keeping the telecommunications industry as an option for work and good work. And I'll get to the good work part in a moment.
Wrap.
Sorry. So we did it just very quickly. So we did a study that looked at calculated how many people it would take over the next 5 years to build these fiber networks, and we came up with about 205,000. So I'll cut to the chase then. All right. So this is we did a survey or a study with the PCCA, the Power Communications Construction Association, and FBA, and I just pulled out Pennsylvania's workforce need, the estimated need. So the workforce for Pennsylvania indicates an estimated 900 field trades, meaning field helpers, laborers, linemen, splicers, operators, foremen, and a bunch of other jobs. It doesn't include jobs that relate to project management, network design, utility locators, which by the way is going to be huge, and inspections and things like that. So we believe the existing world trade workforce in Pennsylvania is half to 2/3 of this size. So surrounding states have similar gaps in workforce. So I think competition is probably going to be pretty fierce. So I thought it would be also interesting to pull out, because we have a reputation of being good on jobs that don't pay well. Well, I've got news for you. This chart shows the low end and high end of these jobs that are here. I'm not going to go through each of them, but if you look at the numbers here, it shows that there's a great deal of financial opportunity, and telecommunications is one of the best kept secrets in terms of careers and jobs. So I'll stop there. And
I apologize, Karen, I promise we'll get there. We've got about just 15 minutes left, so I don't know if we're going to have a lot of time for Q&A. So I'll encourage folks just to come up and talk to us afterwards. Obviously, we have lots of things to get through here today. So Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're here on behalf of the USDA. You are thinking at USDA about investing in rural broadband development. And I'm just curious to hear from you about some of your insights from the field, how those broadband dollars and programs have been deployed. And again, that I think one of the things Debbie said that I really was struck by was this multiplier effect around the benefits, right? That 4 times over that they were seeing from fiber. And so I'm curious, as you're thinking about deploying broadband in rural areas, what are you seeing?
So, good morning, everybody. We've been doing this for 85 years, not just broadband. I worked for the Rural Utility Service, and we were formed in the Rural Electrification Act of 1938, I believe. So back in the day, of course, with electricity in rural areas, so we formed electric cooperatives. A lot of them are still in existence today across the country. Most of them have paid their loans back, but that's the legacy of the program. Is a lot of the rural electric cooperatives formed by Rural Utility Service and funded by us. Back in the 50s and 60s, we kind of turned and we started offering capital for phone service. And we formed, again, cooperatives, telephone cooperatives. We're still in business today, and that was in the 50s and 60s. And now, of course, we're doing broadband. So why are we investing in rural broadband? Well, we've always invested in rural areas. USDA, through our Office of Rural Development, which is a mission area, it's comprised of several agencies in DC, but in the field, you would know us as rural development. We've been investing in rural areas for quite a bit of time. And of course, we do broadband as a utility. Maybe not everyone agrees, everyone in this room probably agrees it's a utility. And maybe not as important as water, but there you go. So we've been doing this for quite a bit of time. We'll be just finishing up our 5th round of funding. And it's not where we've done most rounds are well north of $2 billion. You have, if you want to apply, you have 2 hours. I think it's closing at 12 o'clock today. So sorry about that. Time is everything, right? So it's a broadband home. It's last mile. Okay, and so when an applicant applies, it's for rural areas. There's an mapping tool that tells them where they're eligible to go. They're going to small population centers. And of course, we favor the most rural, the most remote, and be it the poorest and all that. So they always have a leg up in funding. So the cost per mile is not really a consideration. I know it's an investment and it can be expensive in some of these areas, but we want to get to the most remote areas because that's truly where they're going to be tough to get to. And so you can borrow money from us as a straight up loan. A lot of the providers do that. 2% is pretty attractive these days. In the way it maybe wasn't 5 years ago. You can borrow half and get half of the grant. That's very popular as well. And there's 1% grant portion. Of course, that's pretty competitive, but there you go. It depends on where you are and where you're located. So I'll give you an example real quick of what we funded. So I don't know if anyone's ever been to Spartansburg, Pennsylvania. It's a cute little town up in Crawford County, one of the most rural counties in the state. It's got a population, I look it up, but the population is 277 folks, right? When you apply for funds with us, you have to determine your service areas. So you'll draw shape files and mapping tools, and you're basically staking a claim of insufficient service. And how we define insufficient service will be any area you draw which 90% of the households in there do not have sufficient service, which we define as 25 by 3. Terrestrial, so we don't include hotspots, we don't include satellite. So it's got to be fixed wireless or coax or fiber. So I've been up to the town a couple of times, and I did the validation work to back in the day to verify that there was no the internet service is 0. It's truly unserved. I didn't think this existed in Pennsylvania. And I had just gotten started, and this was my first funded project in 2019. I was shocked. There was a town in Pennsylvania that had 0 internet. I mean, the cafe was using a hotspot for credit card. It was just, I couldn't even believe it. So to get there, we have a very small internet provider up there in Youngsville. They borrowed $750,000. So that's the entire investment. $750,000. There's probably less than 100 households within the town, but they're willing to do it, and they borrow money to do it, and they'll get it. So they're hanging fiber as we speak. There was nothing there. There was some legacy copper that they had to actually dismantle to be able to hang on the messenger wire, and they have to bring the middle mile up from Corey, which we pay for. We pay for the whole middle mile. We pay for the drops. We pay for the whole any capital expenditure. We pay for the whole thing, and so. Our survey, the take rate is going to be 100%. They're not aware of a single household is not going to sign up for this. Now, they do it this way, that we have a low cost option. Not everyone has to sign up for the Cadillac plan. So you don't have to sign up, you can do the 25 for $20, or they always do that. We give them a scoring enhancement for that. But so that's a great project, an example, and it's a small investment. In New York, we have $18 million projects to do the entire county. So whatever business model works. In Pennsylvania, it seems to be the internet providers driving the applications, where in New York, it's the county governments. And it works both ways. Now, the county is not going to operate their own system. Of course, they're going to hire an operator. So that's just an inverse of the same business model. For whatever reason, New York works. In Vermont, they have utility districts. And so they're called communication. There's a different way of doing it. They form communication utility districts. It gives them they can raise revenue through revenue bonds. There's different ways of raising capital, but they don't have to go to reconnect or beat or whatever. So there's different ways I've seen of it working. This real quick for workforce development. If you want to take funds and reconnect, we don't force you to adopt certain labor standards, but you're not going to get funded anymore because you're going to get scoring enhancements. So that's all about local workforce. You adopt a training and development, mentorship programs, your neutral and unions, prevailing wage. We do all this kind of stuff to get the score so you can get funded. So we do support. It's a big part of what we do as a workforce development part. We have lots of.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say, well, I do have a couple of questions that we're getting in as well. But I do want to welcome Karen, who I know is joining us virtually via the.
All right, thank you.
So Karen, as we are, we're hearing about all of these different programs that are happening. I'm hearing across all of us also connections to workforce development. And Debbie, I really appreciate also like the numbers behind, like the numbers of jobs that are going to be created here. Because a pretty big ask as a person who thinks a lot about workforce, right? It's also like, these are things that could go badly, right? If we aren't preparing people, if we're not investing in workers, if we're not investing in training. So these could be great jobs that we could be creating access for in these communities. And they need to be something we're thinking about in the future. And that's really my question for you, Karen. What is coming next? What more should we be considering? How are we going to spend these resources? How does Pennsylvania compete? We're sitting here talking about this future of work and the time where we're talking about AI and connectivity and like, what does this mean in Appalachia and rural communities? So I'm just curious for you to help us think future forward here. What do you see?
Thank you so much. And I'm Ashley, and I'm honored to be with you. I wish I could be with you in person. Just a big shout out to Philip Jones, big fan of his. And
thank you. Second, Kevin.
Okay. Are we good? Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm just going to get started then.
Yep, you're good. Okay. We can hear you now. Great.
All right, great. All right, thank you. So I wanted to thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Philip Jones. I'm at Carnegie Mellon University, and I play a role at both in smart cities and smart transportation. We have the National U.S. Department of Transportation National University Transportation Center focused on safety. So every day I see firsthand the impact and possibilities related to secure, reliable, accessible broadband. As Philip knows, I've been beating this drum about broadband for nearly a decade, so even before the pandemic started, because in working in high tech, I have this really great purview of seeing what I call the realm of the possible. I see the world becoming more electrified and automated, right? And I see a world where connected electric vehicles and connected infrastructure, which leads to improvement in improving people's lives, that they have efficient, sustainable, reliable, and equitable transportation, leading to economic development, better jobs, better workforce opportunities, and rising the tide for all boats, right? Not just the two great cities on either side of the state, but communities such as the Mon Valley, communities that have been left behind for decades. And like Ashley mentioned in her opening remarks, it's also about the future of work and its impact on our state. So let's talk about what's possible, right? It's artificial intelligence. It's here. It's not going away. And we are now starting to see how it's going to impact commerce and communities and businesses will be able to improve their efficiency through tools like artificial intelligence and create more wealth for their communities. This has broad applications, especially in agriculture. My little logo here on the top left. And so we should be thinking about not just rural, of course, work from home and things of that nature, but also thinking about manufacturing jobs. Debbie, I was just in Mississippi last week too, and I saw incredible economic development in improvements and investments in Mississippi. And I think our region here has an opportunity there as well. The other piece related to artificial intelligence is making sure that all this broadband technology is cyber secure and protecting it against bad actors. So again, my vision is that my challenge to today's conversation is I want Pennsylvania not just to be good enough, right? I don't think 1 gig up and down is enough. If we want to compete in a global economy, which I know Pennsylvania can do, and I know it's not just, again, the 2 cities on each side, we need to make sure that we have higher speed, reliable, affordable broadband. And Pennsylvania has an opportunity to be a leader in this, taking advantage of the strengths of technology that are developed at institutions like my own at Carnegie Mellon left behind. And my last challenge is, what can we do to ensure that Pennsylvania can optimize this realm of the possible? You see here in my little slide, talking about connected infrastructure, vehicles talking to each other, infrastructure talking to each other. I think Debbie also talked about natural disaster resilience. Our community in Pennsylvania, the weather is getting hotter and wetter. And so infrastructure, including digital infrastructure, can ensure that we thrive. And so I'll stop there. I hope we have a few minutes for a conversation with the audience. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And I was going to say, I do have a couple questions that came in. And so I want to honor that I know folks are listening in virtually and have a couple. I'm going to start with, this is from Tom Thompson. And I thought this was interesting. It's related to what Rob was talking about. And I think some of the things that you guys are thinking about the Broadband Authority. And he's curious about middle mile funding opportunities. So, there's a lot of rewards towards these kind of the home last mile projects. Where do you see opportunities and growth? And I think, Rob, you mentioned something very specific about that.
We only fund last mile. So the project has to be to the home.
Yeah.
But we will pay for every related cost to bring it up there. So it's not a middle mile project at all.
Yeah.
It's to bring them up to their last mile. We will allow them to, within the areas they're not covering them, and they can serve any customer they want at their own expense.
Yeah.
So we'll pay for the infrastructure to get up there. And then, so it's 100% paid, but it's not a middle mile project. It is residential to the home. Yeah.
Do you know of ones you have, or Debbie or Karen, anything you've seen around middle mile funding?
So we actually had, strangely, that's this kind of non-answer. I know we have a middle mile committee that I've only sat in on once. So, but that's so BEAD is really focused on middle mile.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I mean that's nothing state specific. That was good.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania, obviously we too are, a last mile. A lot of the work that we do will be last mile. Having said that, we can pay for, there really aren't middle mile projects when we're trying to reach various communities. So, we can pay for things that are up to that last mile. So, yeah.
I do have a question, I believe that's specific for you, Brandon, which is about participation to date in the Broadband Ready Communities program. I thought that was a really fascinating program, something I think is very relevant to this conversation about building capacity in rural communities.
Absolutely. So I've been out to several community conversations, and I've talked to folks, and mostly counties, not so many municipalities, most of the counties. Those counties, they want to be the ones to help their municipalities bring them across the line here. So one of the things that has to happen with a broadband ready community program is they have to designate a community champion. Well, a lot of the instances, the counties want to act as that community champion to help guide their municipalities across the finish line, which is brilliant. It makes a lot of sense. And so we're absolutely encouraging that. In terms of participation so far, you know, and I wish I had the number. I'm sorry that I don't. But when before pre-registration closed out, we had over 300 very interested pre-registrants that will pass it on, and it's grown.
Yeah.
So we expect that number to seriously grow. We'll see how many of these once they have to pass the resolutions and go with that. But we are absolutely encouraging participation.
Amazing. So I'm going to be respectful of our time because I know we have a pretty packed day here. But I do think, and I hope as we kind of think across all of these different entities who are thinking about investment in broadband, but also the workforce challenges that were raised today, we didn't get to talk about that much. I know we're going to spend a lot of time and dig into this further today. But there is really both a challenge and an opportunity here in terms of what it means to be prepared for this massive investment. And so I appreciate that several of you brought that into your presentations. And I hope that some of the numbers we're sitting with here, the amount of money, the multiplier effect, right, that we're seeing 4 times fold in terms of economic development, community impact, and also the jobs that are going to be created that we in turn need to be preparing people for. So I just want to thank you so much. This is a great, deep conversation here. I hope we've set the stage for some of the imperative for why we are here today. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. And please, if you didn't get to ask a question, please feel free to come up and find us on the break here in a little bit.